My sister accused me of stealing $340, and my parents believed her instantly. My girlfriend left, my reputation was destroyed, until I discovered something hidden in her room that proved she lied. I was 18 years old when my adopted sister walked into my bedroom at 2 in the morning, tears streaming down her face, and told my parents I had stolen from her. Not borrowed, not misplaced, stolen, and not just anything. She said I had taken the emergency cash my parents kept locked in their bedroom drawer, the envelope they saved for actual emergencies. $340. Gone. And according to my sister Kayla, I was the one who took it. I swear to God, I didn't touch a single dollar of that money. But by the time the sun came up that morning, my parents had already decided I was guilty. By the end of the week, my girlfriend had stopped returning my calls. By the end of the month, I understood what it felt like to be completely alone inside a house full of people who were supposed to love you. This is the story of how one lie almost destroyed my life, and how the truth eventually refused to stay buried. Before everything fell apart, life was actually pretty good. Or at least, that's what I kept telling myself. I was a senior at Millbrook High in a mid-sized town in Ohio. The kind of place where everyone knows everyone, where football games on Friday nights are still a genuine community event, and where rumor can travel from one end of the school to the other before lunch period is over. I played baseball, maintained a B+ average without destroying myself over it, and worked part-time at a grocery store on weekends stocking shelves. Nothing glamorous, but it was mine. My girlfriend was a girl named Amber. She had this laugh that started quiet and then kind of exploded, and she wore her dark hair in a ponytail so tight it looked like it hurt. We'd been together for almost a year. She was a year younger than me, a junior, and she was the kind of person who remembered things: your favorite sandwich, the name of your childhood dog, the exact date of a bad memory you'd mentioned once in passing. Being with her felt easy in a way I hadn't expected love to feel. My best friend was a guy named Derek, who I'd known since 5th grade. We played baseball together, argued about movies constantly, and had the kind of friendship where you could sit in silence and it didn't feel weird. His family was loud and chaotic in a way I secretly envied. And then there was my family. My parents, Robert and Diane, adopted Kayla when she was 6 and I was 8. I remember the day they brought her home. She was small, with wide brown eyes and hair in 2 uneven braids, wearing a yellow dress that was a size too big. She didn't speak much at first. She clung to my mom and watched everything with this careful, measuring look, like she was calculating whether this place was safe. I tried to be a good big brother. I taught her how to ride a bike in our driveway. I let her watch whatever she wanted on TV when I had the remote. When kids at school were mean to her in 3rd grade, I found out about it and had a very pointed conversation with the ringleader that I'm not entirely proud of, but which effectively solved the problem. The thing is, somewhere along the way, the dynamic shifted. I didn't notice it happening gradually. It was one of those things you only see clearly in hindsight. Kayla learned that tears worked. Not in a calculated villain movie way, not at first. She was a kid who had been through real trauma before she came to us, and tears were a language she developed for survival. But as she got older, she learned to deploy them strategically. My parents, for their part, were terrified of failing her. They'd read every book on adoption and trauma and attachment. They were careful with her in a way they'd never needed to be careful with me because I'd never given them reason to worry. I was the easy kid, the reliable one, and without either of us really choosing it, that became the shape of our family. Kayla was fragile, I was sturdy, and my parents positioned themselves accordingly. Small things stacked up over the years. Kayla got a later curfew than I had at her age because she needed more social connection. When she broke a neighbor's window with a baseball and lied about it, my mom found out and quietly paid for the repair without punishment, explaining that Kayla was still learning to manage her impulses. When she borrowed $20 from my wallet without asking and I brought it up at dinner, my dad looked at me and said, "She's your sister. You can afford to be generous." I let it go. I always let it go. 2 weeks before everything collapsed, I actually had a good moment with Kayla. She'd been stressed about a history paper, genuinely panicking, and she came to my room at 11 at night and knocked on the door frame. I was tired. I had work the next morning, but I sat with her for an hour and a half, walking through the outline, helping her find sources, explaining how to structure an argument. When she finally left, she stopped in the doorway and said, "You're actually a good brother, you know that." I smiled and said, "Don't spread it around." She laughed, a real laugh. I think about that night a lot. It was a Thursday. I know because I had a calc test the next day and I'd been studying until midnight when I finally gave up and went to sleep. The house was quiet. My parents had gone to bed hours before. I remember thinking, before I closed my eyes, that everything felt fine. At 2:14 in the morning, I know the exact time because I looked at my phone when the noise woke me. I heard Kayla's voice in the hallway, high and shaky. Then my mother's voice, low and sharp. Then my father's footsteps, heavy on the hardwood. My bedroom door opened without a knock. My dad stood in the frame with the light from the hallway behind him. My mom was just behind his shoulder. Kayla was in the hallway, arms wrapped around herself, crying in this quiet, heaving way that was somehow worse than loud crying. "Marcus," my dad said. His voice was controlled in a way that meant he was working to keep it that way. "The money from our room is gone, the emergency envelope." I sat up blinking. "What?" $340. It's not there." "Okay," I said slowly, still half asleep. I don't know anything about that." My mom looked at Kayla. Kayla looked at the floor. "Kayla says she saw you going into our room earlier tonight," my dad said. Everything in me went still. "That's not true," I said. I kept my voice even because I could feel the situation tipping and I didn't want to make it worse. "I was studying in my room all night. I went to bed around midnight." "She says she saw you," my mom said. Her voice had that specific quality, gentle but final, that meant she'd already decided something. Mom, I didn't go into your room. I haven't been in your room in days. Why would I take money? I have money. I get paid Friday. Marcus, my dad's voice went flat. Don't make this worse. I'm not making anything worse. I'm telling you the truth. I looked past him at Kayla, who was still staring at the floor. Kayla, tell them what actually happened. She looked up at me then. Her eyes were red and wet, and something moved behind them that I couldn't read. I told them what happened, she said quietly. Then you lied. Marcus, my mother's voice cracked the air like a switch. She's lying, Mom. I don't know why, but she is. I did not take that money. My father stepped fully into the room and looked at me with an expression that was somehow more devastating than anger. It was disappointment that had already settled in, already made itself comfortable, already stopped asking questions. Get some sleep, he said. We'll talk in the morning. He closed the door. I sat in the dark for a long time, my heart hammering, trying to figure out what had just happened. By Friday afternoon, Derek texted me. Dude, is everything okay? Amber said Kayla told some people at school you stole from your parents. I stared at the screen for a full minute before I could respond. It had begun. The next 2 weeks were the worst of my life up to that point. At home, the atmosphere was like breathing cold water. My parents spoke to me in short, functional sentences. Pass the salt, your laundry's in the dryer, you're working Saturday, fine, no warmth, no eye contact that lasted more than a second. My mother, who used to hug me when I left for school every morning, a habit I'd complained about at 15 and would have given anything to have back by the time I was 18, stopped touching me entirely. My father read the newspaper at breakfast, with the focused deliberateness of a man, actively preventing himself from starting a conversation. Kayla, meanwhile, moved through the house with a kind of careful quietness. She wasn't triumphant, that's what confused me. She wasn't visibly guilty, either. She seemed almost smaller, somehow, like she was trying to take up less space. Sometimes I caught her watching me from across a room with an expression I couldn't decipher. I'd look at her and she'd look away. I was excluded from a family dinner at my grandmother's house the following Sunday. My mom told me it was because I had work, but I'd already checked with my manager, and my shift ended at 4. The dinner was at 6. I sat in my car in the parking lot after my shift ended and ate a gas station sandwich and tried very hard not to feel what I was feeling. Amber called me on Tuesday, 10 days after the accusation. I answered immediately. Hey, she said, her voice was careful. Hey, I've been trying to reach you. I know, I'm sorry, I needed to think. My stomach clenched. About what? There was a pause that lasted too long. Kayla talked to some people, and some of it got back to me, and I know you're saying it's not true, but Marcus, she seemed really upset, like genuinely upset, and I don't know what to believe. Believe me, I said, I'm your boyfriend, I'm telling you I didn't do this. But she's your sister. She's lying, Amber. Another silence. I think, she said carefully, I just need some space to figure this out. She broke up with me 3 days later, via text, in 4 sentences. She said she cared about me, but things felt too complicated right now. She said she hoped we could be friends eventually. She said she was sorry. I didn't respond for 2 days. When I did, I typed and deleted 6 different messages before settling on, I understand, take care of yourself. Then I put my phone face down on my desk and sat there until the feeling in my chest compressed itself into something manageable. At school, the social fallout was quieter but no less complete. Derek stuck by me mostly, though I could tell he was uncomfortable. A few guys on the baseball team went quiet when I approached. A girl named Priya who sat behind me in English stopped making small talk. The worst part wasn't the active cruelty, it was the withdrawal. People just slowly stepped back, like I developed a smell. I heard, secondhand through Derek, that Kayla had told her friends that she'd seen me take the money, and that I denied it to her face, and told her no one would believe her over me. That last detail was the cruelest invention. It made me sound both guilty and menacing. It was so specific that it had the texture of truth. At night, I lay in bed and tried to reconstruct what could have happened. Where was the money? Why had Kayla said what she said? Was she covering for someone else? Had she taken it herself? Had she genuinely somehow convinced herself she'd seen something she hadn't? I kept coming back to one image, the look in her eyes in that hallway, that unreadable thing behind them. I decided I needed to find out what it meant. I started with my own alibi. I pulled up my laptop's browsing history from the night of the accusation and screenshot everything, timestamped. I'd been watching study videos and searching calc problems steadily from 8 p.m. to 11:50 p.m. I'd ordered a pizza at 9:15, which had been delivered at 9:47, meaning there was a brief window where I'd answered the door. Otherwise, I'd been in my room all night. I packaged all of this into a folder I kept in my email, sent to myself. Then I called Derek. I need you to think back, I said. Did you talk to Kayla before this happened? Did she ever mention money being tight or needing cash for something? Derek was quiet. Actually, he said slowly. Yeah, a few weeks ago at the game, she came to watch you play, and afterward she was talking to some of the junior girls, and I heard her mention something about needing money for something. I didn't think anything of it. Do you know what for? No idea, but I could ask Priya, she was standing right there. I almost told him not to bother because Priya was clearly in Kayla's social orbit now, but then I thought about it and said, yeah, ask her. I also reached out to our next-door neighbor, Mr. Halloran, who was retired and spent a lot of evenings on his front porch. He was in his 60s, sharp, a little gruff. I'd shoveled his driveway every winter for 5 years for $20 and a cup of coffee. He liked me. I knocked on his door on a Thursday afternoon. When he answered, he looked at me over his reading glasses and said, "Marcus, haven't seen you in a while." "Yeah," I said. "Can I ask you something weird?" He let me in. I sat at his kitchen table, accepted the coffee he offered without asking, and told him what had happened. He listened without interrupting, which not many adults were willing to do. When I finished, he said, "The Thursday night it happened. I was out on the porch until about 1 in the morning. My hip kept me up. I can tell you for a fact I saw your light on in your room from 8 o'clock until past midnight. You didn't go anywhere. Your car was in the driveway all night." It wasn't nothing, but it wasn't the whole story either. Priya, through Derek, was more reluctant. She texted me directly 2 days later. I suspected Derek had put some pressure on, and said she didn't want to get involved, but that she remembered Kayla mentioning needing money for a concert. Kayla had apparently bought tickets to a show in Columbus, and she'd paid cash, and she'd been secretive about where the money came from. A concert, in Columbus. I searched Kayla's social media carefully, going back 6 weeks. She was on Instagram and her account was public. There it was, 2 weeks before the accusation, a story post that had been archived but not deleted, a photo of a concert ticket stub, Columbus, Ohio. The band was one I'd heard her mention. The ticket price, I looked up, was between $90 and $120 depending on the section. She'd gone to the show, she'd paid cash, she'd told no one in our family. I felt something cold, uncertain settle in my chest. My parents called a family meeting on a Saturday morning 3 weeks after the accusation. I call it a meeting. It was more of a sentencing. We sat in the living room, my parents on the couch, Kayla in the armchair, me in the chair across from her that I'd pulled in from the dining room. The house smelled like my mom's coffee and something baked, which felt almost cruel, this cozy domestic detail wrapped around what was happening. "We've been patient," my dad said. He was using his firm voice, the one that allowed no interruption. "We've given you time to think about what you did and come to us. You haven't done that." "Because I didn't do anything," I said. I kept my voice steady. I'd practiced this. "Marcus," my mom's voice was strained. "We found the envelope. We know it was in the drawer the morning before the incident. There is no other explanation." "There's at least one other explanation," I said, "and I'd like to present it if you'll let me." Something shifted in the room. My dad's jaw tightened. Kayla went very still. "I've been doing some looking into what actually happened," I said. "I think Kayla took the money herself. I think she used it for a concert ticket in Columbus, and when the money was discovered missing, she panicked and blamed me." Kayla's face crumpled immediately. "That is such a lie," she said, and her voice broke on the last word in exactly the way that guaranteed my mother would look at her instead of at me. "Marcus, I don't know how you could," my mom started. "I have evidence," I said. "I'm not asking you to take my word for it. I have screenshots of my computer activity that night showing I was in my room. I have a statement from Mr. Halloran that he saw my light on and my car in the driveway all night. And I have a screenshot from Kayla's Instagram showing a concert ticket she bought with cash around the same time the money went missing." The silence that followed was different from any silence before it. My dad looked at Kayla. She looked at the floor. The crying had stopped. She was very still now, and that stillness was louder than anything she'd said before. "That doesn't prove anything," my mom said, but her voice had changed. It was smaller. "Lots of people pay cash for tickets." "Where did she get the cash?" I asked, genuinely and without aggression. "She doesn't have a job. Her allowance is $40 a week. The ticket was at minimum $90, and she went to Columbus, which means gas or a bus ticket and probably food." My dad said quietly, "Kayla." She didn't respond. "Kayla," he said again, and this time there was something careful and desperate in it. "If there's something you need to tell us, now is the time." "I didn't take it," she whispered, but even I could hear that the conviction was gone. That night, someone, I was never sure who, put a post on the local high school's anonymous gossip account. It said, "Rumor has it the Millbrook theft accusation goes both ways. Who's really covering for who?" It got 43 likes before morning and was screenshotted so many times that deleting it barely mattered. The next day at school, people looked at me differently. Not vindicated, not apologetic, just uncertain, which at that point felt like progress. The evidence that broke everything open was something I stumbled across by accident. I was looking for a charger cable in Kayla's room. She'd borrowed mine and returned it wrong, which is a sentence that tells you everything about our relationship dynamic, when I found the notebook. Kayla kept a journal. I'd known this vaguely, the way you know things about a sibling you don't examine too closely. The notebook was dark green, tucked under the edge of her mattress, and I'm not proud of what I did next. I want to be honest about that. I picked it up and I opened it and I read it. I told myself it was justified. I told myself I was fighting for my life. Both things were true, and neither made me feel good about it. Most of what was in there was the ordinary stuff of being 16, school stress, friend drama, a boy she liked. But then, dated 2 days before the accusation, was an entry that stopped my heart. She wrote that she'd taken the money. She wrote exactly that, in her own handwriting, in dark blue ink. She wrote that she'd needed cash and was afraid to ask because she'd already asked for an advance on her allowance twice that month, and she'd taken the envelope from the drawer intending to put it back before anyone noticed. And then the money was gone faster than she'd expected, and she panicked. And when she heard her parents asking about it, she said the first thing she could think of. She wrote, "Marcus was the easiest explanation. He's always the responsible one. They already think he can handle anything." She wrote, I know what I did was wrong. I've been trying to figure out how to fix it. She wrote, I don't know how to fix it. I stood in the middle of her bedroom with the notebook in my hands and the afternoon sunlight coming through her curtains, and I felt about 17 different things simultaneously. Fury, vindication, a grief I hadn't expected because the entry wasn't the writing of a calculated villain. It was the writing of a scared kid who'd made a terrible choice and then made it worse and then didn't know how to climb out. That didn't make what she'd done okay. But it made it more complicated than I'd wanted it to be. I photographed every relevant page. I put the notebook back exactly where I'd found it. I left her room and sat on the floor of the hallway for 10 minutes, back against the wall, staring at nothing. Then I stood up, took a breath, and went downstairs to find my parents. Scene 7, Confrontation. I asked them both to sit down, which was an unusual enough request that they did. I placed my phone on the coffee table and showed them the photographs. I didn't editorialize, I let them read. My mother's face went through about 6 different expressions in the span of a minute. My father read more slowly, and by the time he reached the last photograph, the hand holding the phone was very still. I called up the stairs, Kayla, can you come down? A pause, then footsteps. She appeared in the doorway of the living room, and the moment she saw the phone in my father's hand, she understood. The color left her face so completely it was almost visual, like watching a light switch off. Kayla, my dad said. His voice was the flattest I had ever heard it. I can explain, she said. Please do, he said. What followed was 40 minutes that I don't have the emotional bandwidth to reproduce completely. Kayla cried, real tears this time, not the strategic ones, ugly and desperate. She explained about the concert, about the advance on her allowance, about the panic. She said she hadn't meant for it to go this far. She said she kept waiting for a chance to take it back, to fix it somehow, and the chance never came. My mother cried too, at one point, and I think that was the moment I understood the most painful part of all of this. My mother wasn't crying because she was angry at Kayla. She was crying because she felt like she'd failed her. Like if she'd just been more approachable, Kayla would have felt safe asking for the money instead of taking it. I had to work very hard not to point out that I was the one who'd spent a month being treated like a criminal by the people who were supposed to protect me. My dad looked at me. Marcus, he said, I owe you an apology that I don't know how to make big enough. I know, I said. I should have listened. You should have, I agreed. It wasn't a dramatic absolution. It was quiet and uncomfortable and insufficient, and we both knew it. But it was real, and I'll take a real insufficient apology over a theatrical one that means nothing. Kayla looked at me across the room. She looked very young and very scared and more genuinely sorry than I'd ever seen her look in my life. I'm sorry, Marcus, she said. I know that doesn't fix it. No, I said, it doesn't. I know. I called Derek after, from the parking lot outside our house, because I needed to tell somebody and I didn't know who else to call. He answered on the second ring and listened while I talked, and when I was done he said, Man, do you want to come over and play video games for about 6 hours and not talk about any of this? I said, more than I want almost anything. I also, that same evening, got a text from Amber. It said, Derek told me, Marcus, I am so sorry, I should have believed you, I should have stood by you. I sat with that text for a long time. Here's the honest version of how things ended, without the Hollywood polish. My parents sat Kayla down and had a series of long, hard conversations with her. She was grounded, had her allowance suspended, and was required to pay back the money from babysitting jobs over the following months. More importantly, they arranged for her to start seeing a therapist, not as punishment, but because it was long overdue. The woman she'd been seeing off and on since the adoption had retired, and nothing had replaced that, and the gap showed. My relationship with my parents took a long time to repair, and I want to be honest that it never fully returned to what it had been before. Something had broken, or maybe something that was already cracked had finally given way. The favoritism, the assumptions, the way my reliability had been weaponized against me, none of that was new. The accusation had just made it impossible to ignore. I had conversations with my parents in the weeks that followed that I'd never had before, uncomfortable and necessary ones. And some things were said on both sides that needed saying, and none of it was easy. My dad, to his credit, was the one who called the parents of kids at school who'd heard the rumors and told them what had actually happened. He didn't have to do that. It was embarrassing for the family, and it didn't benefit him. He did it because he said I deserved to have my name cleared in the same places it had been dirtied. I respected him for that more than I could say. Kayla and I had one real conversation about what had happened, maybe a month after the confrontation. We were in the kitchen, and everyone else was out, and she made tea that neither of us drank, and she asked me if I would ever trust her again. I thought about it for a while. I think trust has to be rebuilt, I said finally. I don't think it works like a switch, but yeah, I think eventually, yeah. Even after what I did. You did something terrible, I said. But you did it because you were scared, and you made a bad choice, and you didn't know how to get out. That doesn't make it okay. But I'm not going to pretend I don't understand what it feels like to be scared and stupid. She looked down at her mug. I would have given you the money, I said. If you'd asked me, I probably would have complained about it and then given it to you. She laughed small and wet. I know, she said. I know that. I was embarrassed. Yes, I said, I know. We didn't hug. We didn't have a movie-perfect reconciliation. But we sat in that kitchen for another half hour and talked about nothing in particular, and it was the most honest time we'd spent together in years, and that felt like something. As for Amber, she texted 3 more times over the following weeks. She was apologetic and genuine, and I believed her. I thought about her often, and about the year we'd had together, and about the laugh that started small and exploded. But I didn't take her back. Not because I was holding a grudge, but because something had clarified for me during those terrible weeks, something about what I needed from a person who was supposed to be on my side. She'd left when things got complicated. She'd chosen doubt over loyalty. And I understood, I genuinely understood that she'd been in a hard position, but understanding something and being okay with it aren't the same thing. I told her that, as kindly as I could. She said she understood. I believe she did. Derek and I drove to a baseball game in Cincinnati at the end of that summer, just the two of us, a 3-hour drive each way, and he didn't bring up any of what had happened until we were on the highway on the way home with the windows down and the radio low. He said, "You know what I think." "What?" "I think you're going to be okay." I laughed. "That's it, that's your insight." "Man, I'm your best friend, not your therapist." He reached over and turned the radio up. "But yeah, I think you're going to be okay." The city lights were behind us, and ahead of us was the flat dark of the Ohio highway, and the warm summer air came through the windows, and I thought about everything that had happened, and everything that had been taken from me, and everything that I'd managed, somehow, to hold onto. And I decided Derek was probably right. I was going to be okay. But I was also going to be different. Older in a way that had nothing to do with age. More careful about who I extended trust to, more deliberate about what I asked for and what I accepted. More aware of the ways people who love you can still fail you, and the ways that failure, if you're honest with yourself, has almost always been visible long before the moment it finally breaks open. That's the thing they don't tell you about surviving something like this. The end isn't really an ending. It's more like a new starting point, one you didn't ask for and wouldn't have chosen, built on the rubble of the version of things you thought you had. You learn to build with what's available. You get better at it slowly, over time. The money was never really what any of it was about, of course. It was about what people assume when they stop seeing you as a full person. It was about the cost of being the reliable one in a family that confused reliability with invulnerability. It was about a girl who was scared, and a family that was broken in ways none of us had been willing to look at directly. $340. That's what it cost to learn all of that. I've paid higher prices since, but that was the first one that counted. And I have never, not once, let anyone make me feel small enough to stop asking for the truth.